Welcome to Dark Feed, where once you find the feed, it finds you. May 3rd, 2007. A girl goes missing from her bed while on vacation with her family. It should have been a local story, a brief report, community tragedy, one that fades into statistics. But this story did not fade. It ignited because the girl was British, because the parents were doctors, because the case was impossible to explain, and because deep down we all saw something in that missing child that terrified us, something that felt personal. Her name was Madeleine Beth McCann. She was 3 years old, and she would become the most famous missing person in the world. The McCann family arrived in Praia da Luz, Portugal on April 28, 2007. They were a family of 5, Jerry and Kate McCann and their children, 3-year-old Madeleine, and her 2-year-old twin siblings, Sean and Amelie. They traveled with a group of friends, all middle-class professionals from the UK. Doctors, anesthetists, pediatricians, 7 other adults and their children. They had planned this trip carefully, a break from their careers, a chance to unwind with their kids. The Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz was a popular family destination. It had pools, tennis courts, a kids club, and affordable apartments close to the beach. On paper, it was paradise, the kind of place bad things don't happen. The McCanns were assigned apartment 5A, a ground floor unit near the pool with 2 bedrooms, a small living area, a kitchenette, and a patio entrance with sliding glass doors. Every night, the group of adults ate together at the Tapas Bar, the resort's restaurant. It was located just a short walk from the apartment complex, close enough to see the back gate of 5A from their table. They dined late, as was the norm in Portugal. The children would be left in their rooms, asleep, and the adults took turns checking on them throughout the meal. This was their routine. Every night, the kids would sleep. The parents would rotate checks. No babysitters, no cameras, just trust. And it had worked, until it didn't. By the time they reached the 5th day of vacation, everything felt normal. That morning, Madeleine played tennis with her father and some of the other children. There are photographs of her from that day, the now infamous image of her in a pink sun hat and white top, standing on the court smiling shyly at the camera. Some believe it was taken on May 3rd. Others claim it was the day before. The McCanns say it was that morning. And if they're right, it's the last picture ever taken of Madeleine alive. The family spent the afternoon together by the pool. Madeleine swam with her siblings. They ate snacks. Kate later said she remembered Madeleine asking, "Can we have 5 more minutes?" One of those ordinary phrases that becomes unbearable when it becomes final. By 7 p.m., the McCann children were back in apartment 5A. Bathed, in pajamas, teeth brushed. Kate and Jerry read them stories, tucked them in. Madeleine slept in a small single bed, closest to the bedroom door. The twins shared a travel cot. At 8:30 p.m., the adults gathered at the Tapas Bar. It was the last time anyone would claim to see Madeleine McCann. The exact timeline of events that followed has been scrutinized for nearly 2 decades. Reconstructed, reinterpreted, picked apart, doubted, and defended. But here is what is widely accepted. 8:30 p.m., the McCanns arrive at the Tapas Bar. They're seated within view of their apartment's back patio gate. The sliding door is unlocked, in case they need to enter quickly. 8:55 p.m., Jerry gets up and checks on the children. He enters through the back, sees all 3 asleep. Nothing seems out of place. On his way back, he stops to speak to a fellow guest, Jeremy Wilkins, for several minutes. Unbeknownst to him, Jane Tanner, one of the Tapas 7, walks past during their conversation. She sees a man carrying a child. She would not realize the importance of this sighting until much later. 9:30 p.m., Matthew Oldfield, another member of the group, offers to check on the McCann children during his turn. He does not enter the room. He listens near the doorway,
hears no noise.
Everything seems calm. He returns to the table. 10 p.m., Kate McCann gets up for her turn. She walks the same path across the pool, through the unlocked back gate, into the apartment, and everything changes. The first thing she notices is that the bedroom door, the one leading to the children, is open wider than they had left it. That's strange. She walks in. The twins are asleep in their cots. But Madeleine's bed is empty. Kate looks around, confused, calls her name, checks the closet, checks the bathroom. She moves toward the window. It's open. The shutter is up. A cold breeze moves through the room. The curtain flutters, and the world splits in half. Kate runs back to the restaurant, yelling, "They've taken her. Someone's taken Madeleine." The words that launch a media firestorm. The cry that still echoes across 2 decades. Within 10 minutes, the search begins. The McCanns, their friends, resort staff, everyone starts looking. They search the apartment, the pool area, the parking lot. They knock on other guests' doors, check alleyways, peek under cars, scream her name into the night. Madeleine. No response, no sound. She's gone. Just before midnight, the Portuguese police arrive. But by then, the scene is compromised. Dozens of people have been in and out of apartment 5A, moving things, touching surfaces, trying to help. They've contaminated everything. What should have been a controlled crime scene is now chaos. There are no photographs of how the room looked the moment she was discovered missing. No early DNA preservation. No security perimeter. The case was mishandled from the start, and the cracks in the investigation would only get deeper. One early theory was abduction. That someone had entered through the window, taken Madeleine, and left silently. But the shutter was a problem. It was a metal roller shutter, difficult to lift from the outside. It was controlled from inside. There were no signs of forced entry.
No pry marks.
No broken glass. And if the abductor had come through the window, they would have had to lift a child over the bed, through a small frame without waking her or the twins or leaving any trace. Was it possible? Yes. Was it likely? No. Another theory emerged. What if the abduction was staged? The idea that Madeleine may have died in the apartment accidentally, and that the window was open to make it look like a kidnapping. It was a theory pushed quietly at first, then loudly by the Portuguese police, and it would take center stage in the months ahead. But on May 3rd, no one was prepared for that. That night, the town of Praia da Luz was still searching, still believing that a stranger had taken a little girl, and that maybe, if they moved quickly enough, they could still bring her home. By the early morning hours, the word had spread. Resort guests began helping. Locals showed up with flashlights. People walked the beaches, searched the cliffs, searched the sewer grates, searched the resort's church, but they didn't find a trace. Not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint, not a sound. Madeleine McCann had vanished. Not from a trail, not from a hike, not from a rural cabin, from her bed, in a modern apartment, on a family vacation, while her parents were just yards away. In the coming days, things would spiral. Witnesses, contradictions, unidentified men, shifting timelines. The press would descend like vultures. Theories would multiply. Finger-pointing would begin. But on that first night, the silence was pure. It was the kind of silence you feel in your chest. The kind that tells you, something is gone, and it's not coming back. And now, 17 years later, the timeline remains. It hasn't changed. 8:30 p.m., Madeleine goes to sleep. 10 p.m., she is gone. 20 minutes, that's all it took. For a life to disappear, for a myth to begin. The day after Madeleine vanished, Praia da Luz stopped being a vacation town. It became a crime scene, an international news story, and ground zero for one of the most controversial investigations of all time. May 4th, 2007. Police were overwhelmed. Tourists were panicked. The McCanns were shattered. Flyers with Madeleine's photo were printed in English and Portuguese. Volunteers formed human chains across the beach. Sniffer dogs arrived. But by then, nearly 12 hours had passed. 12 hours is a lifetime in a missing persons case, especially for a child. The first round of questioning began with the parents and their friends. The group was cooperative at first. They shared timelines, described their rotations checking on the kids, outlined the dinners at the tapas bar, reaffirmed that their doors were left unlocked so they could slip in easily. But police noticed something strange. Each member of the group told slightly different versions of events, differences in time, descriptions of who checked when, contradictions about who saw Madeleine last, and the inconsistencies began to spread. Then came Jane Tanner's statement. Jane said that around 9:15 p.m., she walked past Jerry McCann and a man he was talking to near the apartment. As she crossed the road, she saw a man carrying a child. She didn't think much of it at the time. It was only later, after Madeleine was reported missing, that the details seemed chilling. Jane described a man, average height, mid-30s, light brown hair, wearing beige pants, carrying a young girl in pink pajamas. The child was barefoot, unmoving, appeared to be asleep. She later realized Madeleine had been wearing pink pajamas that night, but the timeline was off. If the man Jane saw had Madeleine, then she had to be taken between 9 o'clock and 9:15 p.m. That would mean Jerry's check around 9:05 p.m. missed the abduction by minutes or was lying. The police were suspicious. How could two adults, Jane and Jerry, pass within feet of each other and neither see the man with the child? Jerry said he never saw Jane. Jane insisted she walked right past him. Something didn't line up. The media caught wind of this discrepancy, and for the first time the word cover-up began to surface. The idea that perhaps the group had rehearsed a narrative, that the story had been shaped, not just told, that maybe they weren't just witnesses, maybe they were participants. In late May, a local woman reported seeing a man watching apartment 5A days before the disappearance. She said he was sitting on a wall, staring. She thought it was strange, but at the time, just another man in a tourist town. She came forward after the news broke, but the man was never identified. The McCanns returned to the UK, but the case did not fade. If anything, it grew, because by early June, the Portuguese press began publishing unverified leaks. Stories of bodily fluids found, stories of inconsistencies, stories of grief that didn't look right, and then the dogs were brought in. In early August 2007, 2 British sniffer dogs were used in the investigation. Eddie, trained to detect cadaver scent. Keela, trained to detect blood. They were brought to apartment 5A and the rental car the McCanns had hired weeks after Madeleine disappeared. The dogs were videotaped during their searches, and what they did changed everything. Eddie alerted to the corner of the parents' bedroom in 5A, the living room behind the sofa, the wardrobe, the patio, and the key fob and boot of the McCanns' rented Renault Scenic. Keela indicated the same spots, in particular the back of the rental car. Traces of blood were collected and sent for testing. When the results came back, they were inconclusive. A partial DNA match to Madeleine was reported in one sample, but the chain of custody was messy. The area had been contaminated. The sample degraded. Some experts said the match was meaningless. Others said it was the smoking gun. Portuguese police began to form a new theory. They suspected that Madeleine had died in the apartment, possibly from an accidental fall or overdose or injury, and that the McCanns had hidden her body, then weeks later rented a car to dispose of it. The window, the open shutters, a setup. The cries of abduction, a distraction. They didn't say it aloud. Not yet, but they believed it. By September 2007, both Jerry and Kate McCann were officially declared Arguido's suspects. It was a stunning moment. The grieving parents of a missing child, now treated as potential murderers. Kate was asked by detectives, "Did you sedate your children? Did you carry Madeleine's body to the beach? Do you know where her remains are buried?" She denied everything, asked for legal representation, refused to answer some questions. The tide turned again. Public opinion began to fracture. Some believed the McCanns were being persecuted. Others thought they were guilty and arrogant. The press fed the fire with speculation. The Tapas 7 lawyered up. They refused to give further statements. The McCanns hired PR firms. They started a foundation. They raised millions. They also hired private detectives. The case became two things at once: a global hunt for a missing child, and a war over who to blame. Meanwhile, police still had no body.
No eyewitness abduction. No weapon. No confession.
Nothing definitive. Just rumors. Just a pair of dogs. Just a gaping silence. In October, British forensic scientists publicly contradicted Portuguese claims. They said the DNA samples were too weak to be considered reliable. The Portuguese authorities pushed back, but in July 2008, the McCann's status as suspects was formally lifted. The case was archived, closed, but not forgotten. The world had changed. The McCanns had become symbols and targets, their faces known on every continent, their daughter's photo recognizable in every country. And yet, the central truth remained unchanged. A girl had disappeared, and nobody knew how, or why, or where she was. In Part 3, the last photo will follow the long tail of this case into the modern era. The German suspect, Operation Grange, failed leads, and the haunting legacy of a child who vanished before our eyes. Because even now, 17 years later, the questions haven't stopped, and neither has the darkness. For a long time, there was only the photo, Madeleine, standing at the edge of a pool, pink sun hat, faint smile, squinting into the sun. The picture was reportedly taken just hours before she vanished. And for the next decade, that image would become a symbol of missing innocence. It was printed on billboards, news reports, search posters, websites, t-shirts, flyers, seen by millions, shared by billions, and yet it offered no answers, just a frozen moment, a portrait of a little girl who, according to official records, should still be alive, but isn't. When the case was officially shelved in 2008, it felt like the end. The Portuguese investigation was exhausted. No charges filed.
No suspects convicted.
No new leads. The world moved on, but the McCanns didn't. They launched the Madeleine Fund, an organization to continue the search privately. They hired detectives, appeared in interviews, spoke at vigils. They never stopped saying her name. In 2011, a massive new inquiry was launched, this time by Scotland Yard. The British government poured over £13 million into the investigation, codenamed Operation Grange. Their goal was simple: review everything. Go back to day one, back to the timelines, the witness reports, the photographs, the DNA samples, the dogs, the alibis, the people no one talked to, the people who talked too much. It was a full-scale reinvestigation, and it led them nowhere. For years, Scotland Yard followed thousands of leads. They investigated burglars in the area, resort workers, pedophile rings, known sex offenders, and even religious cults. They released new sketches, issued public appeals, offered rewards, interviewed more than 600 people. But nothing stuck. Every theory unraveled. Every suspect collapsed under scrutiny. Every new revelation turned out to be a shadow. Until June 2020, 13 years after the disappearance. The German police held a press conference. They said they had a new suspect, Christian Bruckner, a German national, a convicted sex offender, with a long history of child abuse, theft, drug trafficking, and violence. He had served time in Portugal and Germany. He was a drifter, a loner, predator, and he had been living in the Algarve region in 2007, just miles from Praia de Luz. He had worked odd jobs, had access to vehicles, knew the resort, knew the terrain, and on the night Madeleine disappeared, his mobile phone had been pinged near apartment 5A. Bruckner was already in prison in Germany when he was named, serving time for the rape of a 72-year-old woman. He had been under police radar for years, but the McCann case had never tied him in until that phone ping. German prosecutors declared, "We are certain that Madeleine McCann is dead, and we are certain that Christian Bruckner is responsible." But they didn't press charges. Why? Because they had no physical evidence.
No witness. No confession.
And no body. Bruckner denied involvement. Through his lawyer, he called the accusations nonsense. He said he had nothing to do with Madeleine's disappearance. He refused to speak to investigators, refused to cooperate, refused to answer questions. And over time, the case began to fade again. The Madeleine McCann story has lived through 3 decades. The 2000s, the 2010s, and now the 2020s. And every era has had its version. The early days of panic and print media, the rise of online conspiracies and YouTube psychics, the age of armchair detectives and viral TikToks, the Netflix documentaries, the true crime podcast, the angry subreddits, the guilty look analysts, the timeline obsessionists. Madeleine became more than a missing child. She became a vessel for fear, for grief, for projection, for conspiracy, for rage, for guilt. But one thing remained untouched: the fact that no one knows what happened. Not for certain. No theory has been proven. No suspect has confessed. No body has been found. Just the photo, just the room, just the silence. Over the years, there have been false alarms. A girl spotted in Morocco, a child seen on CCTV in Brussels, anonymous tips from psychics, a teenager in the US claiming to be Madeleine, a viral case in 2023 where a Polish woman said she was the missing girl. DNA tests proved otherwise. All of them dead ends, all of them distractions, and still the photo remains. The same one, the little girl in the hat, standing by the water, her eyes too old, her smile too quiet. It's not just a photo anymore, it's a haunting, because it's all we have. In 2023, Operation Grange was downsized again. Officials said they were holding onto one final active line of inquiry, but there have been no updates since. And now, 17 years later, we are left with a question. How does a child die?